Hey Addicts, welcome back to another Walking Dead discussion. I'm Josh, and today we're going to be talking about The Walking Dead Season 9, Episode 6, and we're going to be doing things a little bit differently today, testing out new lighting, and we're going to go through a little bit different format than we typically do, make it a little bit more of a, I don't want to say personal talk, but we're just going to make it more focused on the discussion more than the recap. And we're just going to get right into it. This episode, I thought it was good. This is the first episode that we have after it, but there are little problems that I didn't necessarily fully enjoy or like at all. So we're just going to get right into it with starting off. This is the true new beginning, or as I put it down, the real new beginning. This is something that, this is the actual, where the comic, I guess, starts for its new beginning. In the show, we got a two-parter to this beginning, with them starting a year and a half after, and now with this episode, it looks like we're seemingly maybe, it's hard to tell because of, how old the actors are versus how old they want us to believe these characters are, but it's looking maybe around 5-7 years, maybe. It's kind of hard to tell, but somewhere around that ballpark, probably less than 10 at least, but we're in this new part, and a lot of people got new looks. We get to see that, there's a lot of cool ones. Just the couple that I wrote down was like Michonne. She's got a little bit of her hair different. She's got Eugene, who's rocking that ponytail. But he's also got this new air around him where I don't want to say he's a full-on badass, but you get to see a little bit more of him coming into that. And then Carol, I think, I don't know why, but for some reason Carol screams Braveheart to me, but it's still a cool look. And then we got Aaron, who's carrying on Rick's look in spirit, or at least his comic version look. But we get to meet up with the new group that, if you guys are show fans only, this is a group that we get to actually open up this new story arc and after the time skip with, and that is Magna and her little band. Not all of them are important. The only two that I can actually remember like full on their names are Magna and Yumiko, and I think they even changed Yumiko's name. They made her Miko or something like that. I don't know if they're just doing that as like a shortening of her name, or if they're actually changing her character altogether. But there is a lot of differences between her group in the show and in the comic, and I'll go in a little bit about that later. Because I'm gonna, I'm not doing a recap per se like I typically do. I'm just kind of going through my thoughts as I see them in the episode with the notes that I wrote down. So the next thing I have is Eugene, and I kind of mentioned this a little bit before. We get to see Eugene has a lot of growth. Eugene, I don't know if I've mentioned it before, even in my comic stuff, but Eugene is a character that I would say he's probably in like my top 5 characters, mainly, or at least in terms of growth, because he's got such an intriguing arc between, when we first see him and now. And even in the show, I think you can really tell how much he's grown. There's still peaks of, like old Eugene, but for the most part, he's really coming into this, member of the community that can use his brain to think of things, but also, he's not afraid to get his hands dirty, and he will. There's actually a really cool moment between how Magna meets up with the group, and we get to see Eugene take out several walkers by himself. Which, Magna's group and them meeting together, I think it was okay. It's not as epic as it was in the comic, which is a little sad they didn't go that route. And also with Judith in the mix of that, I don't find that very believable in one way, and then just, I don't know. For some reason, it just doesn't land with me. I feel like it's very forced to have her doing these things at the age that she's in. I would have maybe preferred if they took more of a young Carl aspect to her, but then again, we've seen that before, and it was annoying with how they did it in the show. So, at this point, she's there. You can't really change much of that. At this point, I just kind of tolerate it. I might change my mind on that, whether I like it more, but for me right now, I'm just kind of like, just go on with it. In this moment, we get to see a jump back to the kingdom. At least it looks like the kingdom, because we get to see, Ezekiel, Carol, Jerry. Which, by the way, Jerry, I don't know. Well, I haven't been able to say this because we haven't really seen him much do anything this season. But Jerry, ever since they introduced him, I really liked his character. He's a new addition to where we didn't really have him in the comic, or they expanded his character more and maybe did some remixes. But I'm really glad that he stayed around. He survived the war because I just love seeing him. And I think the actor that plays him has super good charisma with the rest of the people that he's supposed to be with. This is when we actually get a look at Henry when he's older. And I don't know what it is about this guy, but I actually do like him more than I do Carl, at least in the TV show. I don't know, for some reason, and I don't think that's because of the actor so much. I mean, I wasn't a huge fan of Chandler Liggs, but I didn't mind, some scenes with him. But I think mainly it was dropping the ball between like the writers and then the show trying to redo things in a not so good way. But for some reason, just the air about Henry, and also his look, he doesn't look as, for lack of a better term, bitchy as Carl did when he was in his last moments. So he hasn't proved himself at all, and me giving him this praise, but just I like the air about him, I guess. That's not to say anything. He might be a complete screw up in the later part of the season or whatever. But so far, I'm not against it. I'm just cautiously optimistic. It looks like they're going to be giving him some Carl story. We actually see that, he's going to the hilltop to live there, similarly to how Carl did in the comic. And they may even give some relationship stuff to Henry later on, which I'll be looking forward to how they remix that, or if they'll even go that route. I don't think since Carl's not here, they don't really have to go that route. But it's looking like they're leaving the possibility open. So I'm curious to see how they use Henry going forward. Oh, yeah. This is another thing, because we get to go a little bit more of like Magna in her group. She's got somebody in her group that sign languaging. I don't know if there's a better term for that, but that it also seems like they're mute too, because they don't even talk when they're responding to people. So I'm not sure what their deal is, but I don't recall that character being like that in the comic. And I mean, it's maybe not something that will stand out as much in the comic because, you just read all of the dialogue. But for me, that kind of threw me off. I was like, wait, what? And also, if they're deaf, which I don't know if they are, I'm assuming that they are because they have to sign language them for, her to get it. I just don't see how that's very believable for somebody to survive the apocalypse where, hearing is a very dire thing. I don't know. It's something I was just surprised. It doesn't really bother me, but it was just kind of like, huh. There's also a lot of, other people in her group that they remixed it in a way that I don't know if I'm entirely comfortable with. It's kind of fine. I'll go into a little bit more about that. I'm getting ahead of myself. But we get to see that, Magna's group, they actually meet up with them in the forest with the other people that were looking for Judith, and they decide that they're going to take them back to Alexandria, and we get to see Alexandria fully, after this second time skip. And all I got to say about the community is, holy crap, does it look better. This was like probably one of my main complaints for the series once they introduced Alexandria. Maybe not when they first introduced Alexandria, but when they started expanding it to the other communities, I was like, wow, these communities look like shit. Like, they look small, and they don't look very populated. In the comic, I think Alexandria's supposed to have like around 60 people. I think the Hilltop's supposed to have a little over 100. And then the Kingdom's got close to that too, but they're all warriors. And in the show, it just was like, man, it doesn't look like the numbers are here, to really signify how big of a deal this is for finding it. But I will say they do a better job in this, reintroducing of Alexandria. It looks huge. They got the windmill and everything. They got several new buildings, and I just really like that. Not a big thing, but I think it just shows how much more time and effort they're putting into the show now. Another thing we get to see, it's just a little thing. I wanted to, write it down because it's nice that they have this little continuity thing continuing, and that's when the group gets back. Aaron has a little moment with this little girl, and we figure out that little girl is Gracie, the baby that they actually took from the Saviors in the middle of the war. And I just like that little nod where they're like, oh, yeah, they didn't forget about her, and then you get to figure out that, Aaron's taking care of her. And just a small little thing, but I like that. Another thing we get to see, it's a big thing about the communities is, or at least for Alexandria, is that they're, I think Michonne did this name drop, but she was saying that we need to take them to the council. And this is kind of signifying that, they have a group of people that's deciding things. It's not just one person. And I'll be honest with you, I'm a little bit fuzzy at the beginning, at the very beginning of the New Beginning, because that's a mouthful of tongue twisters. But in the comic, I do recall there being multiple people when they met Magna that was with Rick, but I don't believe there was a council. I believe it was more of advisors. And I could be wrong with that, but I'm pretty sure I'm right, because in the comic, currently in the comic, we haven't been seeing any of that. Now, I guess it would make sense, with Rick being away, but, in the show, it's something that I'm looking to see where it goes, because right now it makes sense. They did have something similar back in season 3, so there is that previously established system. And it would make sense that since Rick, their head leader, is gone now, they're going to try to put multiple heads together to try to figure out, because they can't really replace Rick. Or at least one person can't replace Rick. And it's part of me doesn't like that, because I feel like, they're just doing that for maybe future internal conflict, not being able to decide on one thing. But at the same time, I do like it because I was really afraid that Michonne was going to become the macho main lead that's going to be leading Alexandria as a group. And while I don't necessarily dislike, it's not any kind of bias or anything. I just feel like for Michonne's character, it doesn't really fit, because she's always been more of a fighter. I've said that multiple times, in these little episode by episode stuff. But I'm just glad they're not doing that. At least not at this time. I feel like if they do want to build to that, I'd be open with that, but they have to change her character into that role. You know what I'm saying? So that's kind of where I'm at with that. Let's see here. Oh yeah. So Ezekiel, we get to see that he's, what did I write here? If I can even read my own handwriting. He makes this statement, that, bringing the communities back together. And so it kind of sounds like they're in contact with each other, but they're not on good terms. Or it sounded like to me that there's still some wounds, maybe that people kind of, Rick was the glue holding all the communities together. And since he's gone now, it seems like they've become maybe more distant relatives. They see him every once in a while. Maybe they trade with them, on a monthly basis. But other than that, they don't got people going back and forth so much. So that's kind of an interesting comment. I didn't really know what to make of that because, like I said, first episode seeing, a huge time skip. So I'm sure we'll learn about it more in the future. But just a little thing that I think, kind of sneak peeks what the relationship between these communities is going forward when more conflicts arise. Another small little detail that I don't know if people brought up, but I just wanted to mention it, is that Carol has accepted Ezekiel as her husband, and they're now married, because Jerry makes the little bit of remark of, she's the king's wife and the mother of the prince, which, is Henry. So just a little bit of detail there, because I know in the last time, or I believe, actually, you know what? I might be forgetting that, because maybe in episode 5 she did finally accept his gift. But so sorry about that. I couldn't remember. I thought it would be worth mentioning anyway. Okay, so this next part takes up a good chunk of the, maybe not a good chunk, but it is a prominent part of the episode. And there's parts of it I really like, and then there's parts of it that I really hate. And I'm talking about the interview / interrogation by the council towards Magnus Group. There's a really good, like, the questions they ask, asking them what they did to get here, who were they in the past. Like, I do like that style, and I think the way it was written was pretty well. The only thing that I found a little odd, or I just didn't really like it, was with some of the backstories of the people. Maybe not so much, and I think it was mainly just Magna's, because in the comic, I don't think even on the show, it's not really relevant to know their backstories. And, for like most of her group, where it's just like, oh, I was a music teacher, that's fine. I can, that's just a small detail, and really, that little detail doesn't really matter to their story. But for Magna, they make her a ex-con, and in the comic, we don't really know her backstory, so, we don't know how off or on this is, and it doesn't really matter, for most characters if they change something like that, but for Magna, it just seemed a little off, because they went a completely different direction with, I don't want to say completely different, but the vibe of her seems different, it seems like in the comic, she was somebody that was hardened through, the fall of the world and the apocalypse coming, and she's mainly like a Rick, she wasn't bad at the beginning. She just kind of morphed in this person where they're kind of in this gray area where, like, I don't know, I've done bad things, but it's always been for the people around me. She kind of had that kind of vibe, whereas in the show, it seems like they kind of built her up as this, like, yeah, I was, a bad egg, and, when things went to shit, I was even badder, but, I still retained some, I don't know. For some reason, it just didn't land with me, and it didn't really make sense why they had that. I think they just, to be honest, it felt like they just did that to give some type of, like, oh, I don't know if we can trust you, So, I don't know. The whole situation of that was, there was parts of it that I did like, but overall, I think it needed to be done a little bit better, or maybe just a couple of things tweaked. But like I said, the writing for their speeches and the way it's performed when they're talking about their life, particularly, I don't even know the guy's name because he's not really an important character in the comic, but the heavier set guy that is the music teacher, I really liked his speech overall throughout that. And the only other thing that I'll mention is, because I actually wrote it down, is some of the characters in our group, I feel like were changed, and I feel like they're very calculated changes. I'll say that very subtly here. I'm pretty sure you'll know what I mean by that, but in terms, and it's not something that, like, I get why people want, to paint diversity, but it seemed really weird because, like, I don't know. I might as well just come out and say it. So there is one character that he's like a younger, I guess he was maybe early 20s, and he's really thin, and I don't want to say feminine, but he's, I don't know, he seems like he's more of like a soft soul, you know what I mean? Where he's more like, oh, I'm connected. I don't know, just seems, maybe a better word is innocent, you know what I mean? Whereas in the comic, we had this, bigger, burlier guy, and, he kind of looked like a mean dude, but he was still, like, nice. I guess more of like a, maybe like a Tyrese, let me put it that way. So, I don't know, it just seems like there was some things where, like, visually, they picked a certain person because they're like, oh, we want to fit this certain thing. But I was like, in the essence, their character is very similar, but it just seems like they purposely picked a different visual thing to, I don't know. I could be freaking out of my mind here, but it was just something. And it's, like I said, it doesn't really matter, but it was like one of those things like, to me, it didn't really matter changing it, so, like, why did they change it? But you could argue, like, well, if you're okay with it, then why do you matter? I don't know. To be honest, I don't know. But that was just a little thing that I was, like, curious what people thought of people that read the comics. I know Magnus Group isn't, like, a big part of the story, or at least not so far from what we've seen in the comic, so it's not like I really have any opinion, or that I have any strong opinions about it. I might think of I'm just, I know, going off on a tangent. This is great. Okay, so getting back to it, this is why I stick to my notes, people, because things just derail really fast when I don't hold myself to things. So another big change. Oh my gosh, all that bullshit I was spreading finally got clogged in my throat. Okay, so Gabriel, we get to see a sneak peek of Gabriel. My gosh, my words today. Gabriel and his connection to the radio, which is a huge thing of the comic. And I'm actually shocked that they decided to show it this early, because we know that in the comic, Eugene connects to the radio, or connects to the Commonwealth from the radio. And right now, I guess it does make sense because, Gabriel knows that Jadis had some contact with somebody on a radio. And I feel like this is more of him trying to find her than other communities or people. He says that kind of to Rosita, but I'm kind of wondering if he's trying to figure out where she went and to try to reconnect with her. But I'm just really shocked that they decided to give this to Gabriel instead of Eugene. Curious to see if they're going to have something else planned for Eugene, or if he's getting the, comic fans will know what that means. So, another big thing that we get in this little part is Gabriel and Rosita are a thing now, which I found really weird too. I was like, that came out of left field. Just something that's like there that I don't know why it's there, but I think they might be doing this to set up some kind of emotional reaction for a certain thing that's coming, probably. I don't know where it will come. Maybe at the end of the season, if they want to drag it out that long. But a big event, let me put it that way, that's going to involve a lot of different characters. And I feel like maybe they're building connections because they already know who. Well, obviously they know who's going to go, but I kind of feel like that's kind of the direction I want to go. Trying to keep it a little bit spoiler free for people, in case there's some people out there that watch the TV show only that don't want comic spoilers. Now the other thing we have is Michonne's crazy speeches where she's talking to Rick or Carl beyond the grave. And I was just waiting for her to, there's a scene where Judith's walking down the hallway and she hears Michonne talking. I was hoping that just Michonne's coming through the doorway and she's just holding a phone, she's talking onto it. To have that funny callback for Rick when he was in the prison. But, in a sense, it's kind of a callback because she's having these speeches. But I think it's just showing that, we're getting kind of a remix of, in the comic with Rick and Andrea, and then now it's reverse, and since it's not Andrea, it's Michonne, but now we get to see that Michonne is losing Rick, quotation marks, and we get to see her kind of dealing with that. Even although it's really weird to me that they're doing this, this has been going on for years, or she just all of a sudden now do this because so that kind of little thing. Don't really know, but, she's definitely been doing this for years. Cuckoo. Okay, so, we get to see the Saviors, and I'll be honest, I don't know what they're planning on doing with the Saviors. This is something that, I don't know. I feel like the show has got less hope in humanity than the comic does, because in the comic, you're like, oh, we saved these people, now they're working with us. And, there's a few problems, but for the most part, they're willing to work out. In the show, they're like, nope, once a dick, always a dick. And that's kind of what we see here, a little bit of interactions. It seems like, we get to see some saviors die in this episode, and I won't say how because that's a really cool scene, but I'm curious to see if they're implying that was the last of the saviors and they're dead and gone, or if there's still a group of saviors out there. We do know that there is some saviors that have integrated into Alexandria and other communities, but for the most part, it looks like either all of them are dead or they're about to get wiped out, which I think is an interesting direction. There's nobody of importance from the saviors anymore, unless they want to bring Dwight back, which I really hope they do, but we don't know. So, kind of like a little thing. I don't know. It's kind of the same way I felt for Oceanside. It's like, it's just there. Don't really care. The Negan and Judith interaction is something that I don't know how I like it. Let me put it this way. The conversation and the way it goes out, I do like that. And it does make sense that Judith maybe wouldn't know any better to, like, stay away. He's not really a threat. And I think at least I hope she's smart enough to, not let him out or anything like that. But it's just an interesting thing that they're going for. You could see how much they're breaking up Carl's comic story and giving it to multiple characters. And since we basically have two characters or multiple characters that are taking a kind of like a legacy of Rick and Carl and kind of extending them on, it just kind of ups a lot of different characters, or maybe just gives a lot of different characters different things that they can do that, in the comic it was only a handful of characters that really mattered or were doing something interesting. So that's kind of how I see it. Still not sure what they're going to do with Negan, because he seems like he's in a way where he's not wanting to break out. Don't know if we'll get that comic thing, but I'm hopeful. But Negan's another thing where I don't know, for what they've done on the show so far, I don't know how we can get some of the scenes we were supposed to get and where they would make sense. But I'm sure they'll use him in some interesting way. At least I'm hoping. There was a couple things, I guess kind of getting into maybe a side thing of bad, was with we get to know that Rosita and Eugene are the people that are going to be introduced to the Whisperers, and we actually got to see the first introduction of the Whisperers slightly, as more of a tease than a full-on introduction, but this is something that the scene, the way it plays out, it felt like a little bit poor writing, to be honest, because when they're at the tower and the horses are spooked away, which I don't know what Rosita was doing. She was just kind of staring there like an idiot, like, oh, what? The horses are leaving? Oh, well, Eugene, come on down. So that was kind of like, I don't know why she didn't do anything. Also, once they saw that the horses, were gone, I don't know why they didn't just go up or stay up on the water tower, because, if you're high enough up, the walkers, they shouldn't, they shouldn't be able to detect you, or smell you or hear you. Now, granted, with Whisperers, not really. I think they'd be able to. I think they wouldn't touch them if they were up on the water tower, because expose them. But I don't know. That whole scene just felt like it could have been written a little bit better, or maybe the scenario could have been a little bit different. Another thing, though, was I felt it really lacked the intensity and the creepy atmosphere of their introduction, with it not being maybe at night or at dusk, or at least having it rain. I was really hoping that we were going to get a rain section, because kind of looked like they were going to at least go some kind of route like that in the trailer, but here it's kind of in the middle of the day. I don't know, it just takes away from a little bit of the horror aspect. So overall, I still like how they're keeping, the big reveal under wraps, even getting this, sneak peek and mini introduction, but at the same time, I feel like they could have filmed that a little bit better to give it more horror. So, but overall, not bad. Just something that it's another thing where I'm could have been a little bit better. This one I have a little bit of prediction. It's probably way off, so I'll save that for later. I just want to mention Carol and her fire antics. She's back to setting things on fire, prison reference. And I really liked that scene. It doesn't really add anything, and I guess it just goes to show that, the Carol that she's portraying herself as towards Henry, the mothery aspect, it's not don't take that as a new Carol. She's definitely the old Carol. She's just trying to have, this other part of her life be important. So, a nice little deal there. Oh my, what is this? Don't you hate it when you can't read your own handwriting? Oh, now I can read it. Okay, so, yeah, I was scribbling this, I was, looking at the TV while I'm writing, so it makes it kind of hard to read. But this is something I could have mentioned in the last episode, but Judith having that big python, I don't know how she would be accurately able to shoot that with her small frame, so I think that's more of, instead of it being, a nice little... is moniker the right word I want to use? I don't know. Instead of it being like an homage type thing, it seems more, it's just kind of comical, because you just see look at this 7 or 8 year old girl with this huge ass gun. How she even able to hold that? It looks bigger than her torso, but I don't know. I would have maybe rather seen somebody else take it up and then, maybe gift it to her when she's older, seasons onward. But, overall, not a big thing. Just a little something. If anything, I'm just, going through little stuff right now. But, another big drop that we actually get, and it's, I would say it's probably important later on at least, is we get to see Michonne, and she has another kid, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, but I'm pretty sure this is Rick and Michonne's son, biological son. This isn't adopted. This is one that they actually were able to have before Rick disappears. And I'm curious to see where they're going with this. I'm not a huge fan of having kids on shows. Sometimes. There's, for the most part, I would say that fits into that. There's some really good child actors on there, don't get me wrong. But it just seems really weird that they're, I feel like they just got rid of, having to deal with a child or a baby, before they did the time skip with Judith, and now they finally got her older, they don't got to worry about that. But now they're going to have another kid, and I'm just curious to see how that's going to play out. Because I don't want it to be a burden in the show. So I'm hoping that, it actually has some form of impact on the story later on. That they're not just being like, oh yeah, this is a character that we can have later on, decades down the road. So I'm hoping it's not so much like a setting up for a cash grab that it is like, what's it going to pertain to the story? So the next thing I have written down, and it's very little, but did anybody notice how Daryl's looking a lot like his character from Death Stranding? Is that just me? It seemed like he's like, alright guys, I'm going to stay away from the community. I got to go do this game real quick. I'll be back after I'm done dealing with some freaky shit. And but I did like the little reunion between Daryl and Carol, and I hope they have a little bit more of Daryl, because I'll be honest, now that Rick is gone and we don't have, Rick is my favorite character, so seeing Rick gone, and Dwight is gone too, another one of my favorite characters, and Negan is not really his comic self. So at this moment in the show, Daryl is probably my favorite character, and I really liked how they brought back older version Daryl into the new season. So I'm really hoping we see more of him, because I've been liking what they've been doing with his character so far in the season. I think it'd be a real waste to put him on the back burner, especially since there's a huge thing that they can dive into with Rick and Daryl in those final moments, and what he feels about that and what he's willing to do for the future. This was something I wanted to ask the community, because for the life of me, I cannot remember. So there's a scene where I guess Michonne's changing or whatever, and we get to see her back, and there's an X on, I guess, the side, on her back, on the side, maybe around where maybe the kidneys are. And for the life of me, I couldn't remember what that was from. I was like, is that from when they were at the prison dealing with the governor? I was like, no, that doesn't sound right. Is it from the war? I couldn't remember. So if you guys can remember what that's from or what that's supposed to reference, let me know. Because they spent like a good maybe 10, 15 seconds focusing on that thing, and I was like, I'm at a loss because I could not picture it in my mind. So if you guys could let me know in the comments, really appreciate that. Okay, so the next thing is kind of going into next week's episode and whatever. We get to see that Magna and her group are not going to be staying at Alexandria. This is another remix. Well, potential remix. They could always come back to Alexandria. But we're seeing that Michonne's like, oh, I'm not comfortable with you staying here, but I'm willing to throw you into Maggie's lap and, kind of see where that's going. Now, and this is something I just thought of, since we know Maggie is potentially leaving the show, at least maybe for a little while, at least, Lauren Cohan, they might be trying to set up Magna as the new leader, which, if they go that route, not really looking forward to that. Or, I don't know. We'll see how it goes. Not to get ahead of ourselves, but we just know that, they are setting up to where they're going to be taking them to the hilltop. So in the next episode, out of the previews we saw, there was a lot of images of them running around. But from what I gather, most of the episode is going to be of Michonne and Sadiq getting Magna's group to the hilltop, and then also seeing Eugene and Rosita either make their way back to Alexandria or, evade the Whisperers a little bit while longer. So, really interesting to see where it's going forward. Personally, I thought it was a good episode. Seeing the show without Rick is really weird, and I will say it feels a little empty without him. And there are, although I will say, out of the things I disliked about the episode, it was more of what they decided to do. It wasn't the absence of Rick. I think they're, at least so far, it looks like they're pulling off a little bit about, Rick not being there. But I don't know how well that's going to hold up once they get into conflict. But regardless to say, really sad that Rick is gone. But the show is still really decent without Rick, at least so far. And the the quality and everything they showed has been better in this season than it has in the last two seasons, hands down. There's, not to say it doesn't have some problems, not to say that they still have to, fix stuff, but, the worst episode we've seen so far, 10 times better than any episode in the last two seasons. At least that's my opinion. And, I'm still looking forward to, what the season entails and how they're going to turn around the show. Not to say I'm the biggest fan of it. I know some people, were talking about how they hated the last episode and, Rick's, cop-out thing. I wasn't surprised about it. AMC has done this hundreds of times. Maybe not hundreds of times, but they've done it a lot. And so I wasn't really shocked about that. I was more relieved because, Rick is The Walking Dead. And in this time of the story, I didn't think it felt right for him to leave. And so it just makes sense to me that they decided to keep him alive. Although, not liking that they're planning on making a trilogy movie, or at least that's what I heard, a trilogy of movies with him. If anything, I would have been more open if they brought him back at some point. So, after the movies, or if they decide that the movies are the real thing, I might be on your side of like, that was fucking bullshit. But until then, I'm cautiously optimistic. It's looking good. I still enjoyed this episode a lot, even with the little things that I said that I didn't like. And, so far, I've been liking it. And, I'm not gonna sit here and, trash talk it when I've been enjoying it, for the most part. So, I'm just gonna stay positive, and I'll be back for the next episodes. We have 2 more episodes in this year until there's a little bit of a time break. So, which is thankful because I have a very busy schedule, but we will be back for that. Probably in the the break, we will have another comic to review. So stay tuned for that because I have been doing all of the, I think from 181 or 180 to current of the comics. I do them, and if some of you people maybe want to see me do like the compendiums while the break is going on, let me know. Or if you want to see anything else Walking Dead related, or if you got anything that is zombie related, or, it doesn't have to be zombie related, just any other thing that you want me to look at, let me know. I'm pretty open to that. But this is an extra long video, so I'm going to close it, and I'll see you guys later for the next episode. Later.